everyone, and welcome back to Mariana Mas Books. My name is Mariana, and today on this lazy Sunday, I am here with you with my non-fiction November TBR. So I'm calling this my first draft of a TBR because if you know me, you know that in the end I end up reading different books than the ones I mentioned in my TBR, and that doesn't stress me out. Like, I'm not one for being very like, oh, I need to stick to a TBR. So even though today I feel confident that these are the books that I want to read, there is a big chance that during November or during the next days of October I will discover another book, or I will be watching someone else's TBR and think, oh, that sounds interesting, I'm going to add it to my TBR. And so in the end I will probably end up reading different books than you see here. But as of today, this is my nonfiction November TBR. I wanted to film the video today because I'm very excited. You know, if you've watched my channel before, you know that Nonfiction November is my favorite readathon or booktube event of the whole year. I am always very excited when the announcement comes. So ever since the announcement, I wrote down the prompts and I've been putting together my TBR. If you don't know, Nonfiction November is just a book event to read nonfiction. I'm not going to go into more detail because you can watch Olive's announcement video, a book Olive, which I'm going to link down below. So today I'm just going to tell you what the prompts are and what is my current TBR for those prompts in case you want some inspiration. And then of course at the end of the month I will do a wrap up and we'll see what books I ended up reading. I think without further ado we can go to the books. So let's go to the books. The first prompt is record. Olive always does the prompts like this. She gives you one word, so there are 4 words and each word is a prompt and you can interpret that word in whichever way you want. If you go to Olive's channel, she posted a video where she was giving some recommendations, and she gives you a couple of options of how you can interpret the word, but you don't have to follow her interpretations. You can interpret the word in however way you choose. I always say that literally any book can be connected to any prompt if you think about it creatively. I think last year I did a video where I recommended books and then I said how they could fit every prompt from last year. So I'm going to link both my video and Olive's video. Of course, the video I'm going to link of mine is from last year, so it's from the prompts of last year, but if you watch it, then you can give yourself an idea of how you can match any book to any prompt. So in that video, I'm talking about the book and I am matching it to all 4 prompts of last year, and you could take any of those books that I talk about there and match them to any of the prompts from this year. So that's part of the fun of Nonfiction November, is seeing how you will interpret each of the prompts. So the first prompt is record, and this is one where I am currently reading one book that I'm going to count for this prompt at the end of November. So hopefully I will finish this book and then read the other 4 in November, but if not, I'm going to count the one I'm currently reading for this prompt, which is Children of Ash and Elm, A History of the Vikings by Neil Price. So that one is, as the subtitle says, a history of the Vikings, so it's historical non-fiction. And the way I'm matching it to the prompt record is that one of the difficult things for historians about the Vikings is that they didn't leave any written record. All that historians base their knowledge on is either archaeology or texts written late, like thousands of years later than the Viking Age. And often there are texts written by people who were enemies of the Vikings, so you have that bias going in. Oh, I'm going to talk more about that when I wrap up this book. But so the Vikings didn't leave any written record about themselves. Another way that I could interpret this for record is that this is my personal record of the longest non-fiction book I will have ever read. So that would be a personal record of mine. So that is how I am interpreting record for this book. Then that's what I'm currently reading. I will count that for Nonfiction November if I don't get to another one, but if I do, I want to read Too Much to Know: Managing Scholarly Information Before the Modern Age by Anne M. Blair. This one is basically a history of how humans through the ages have kept record of scholarly information. It says the flow of information brought to us by advancing technology is often accompanied by a distressing sense of information overload. Yet this experience is not unique to modern times. So apparently, through all ages, there has been information overload. And in this book, Anne M. Blair tells us how people through the ages have managed that information and have kept yeah, you can see how it relates to record, right? So that's the one. The next prompt is Element, and for Element I'm going to be reading Things Are Against Us by Lucy Ellman. It is an essay collection by Lucy Ellman, who, if you know her, she also wrote Doc's New Report, which is a fiction book, but this one is an essay collection. And the way I'm interpreting this one for Element is super basic. I love reading I love reading essay collections, and I actually like when I'm a writer myself, and what I write is more like essay type non-fiction, personal essay type non-fiction. So this is my element, both for reading and for writing, so super easy. That's how I'm interpreting this one for Element. The next prompt is Border. Border. So that's the next prompt. And for that one, I am going to read another essay collection. I tell you, it's my element. And that one is called American Fictionary by Dubravka Ugrešić. Dubravka Ugrešić is a Croatian author, but she is from former Yugoslavia. And so in this essay collection, she writes about her experience as someone who was in the midst of the Yugoslav war in the early 1990s, and she traveled to the US for a conference, maybe. She was invited as a guest lecturer to the US. So she traveled from Yugoslavia, which was in the midst of the Yugoslav wars, and she traveled to the US for to be a lecturer. And so in this essay collection, she writes her experiences and like the cultural shock coming from the war into the US, which is a very capitalist and high privileged country. And so she writes about that, about the experiences of being a writer in a foreign writer in the US. So you can see how it relates to Border. And then finally, the last prompt is Secret, and for that one I am going to tell you what I'm currently reading, which I will count for my Nonfiction November wrap-up, and then I will tell you the one that I want to read if I finish with the one I'm currently reading. So the one I'm currently reading, it's called Tarology, and it is by Enrique Enríquez. And Tarology, as the name might suggest, is a book about tarot, but it is a very rebellious book. It's not traditional thinking about tarot. In tarology, Enriquez, tarology is kind of like he's invented, it's a word he invented, and it's a concept he invented, and it basically is an approach to tarot as alphabet. So it's kind of like tarot and poetry, tarot and language, and the whole book is kind of like a poem in itself, like contemporary, the type of contemporary poetry I like, that when I share poems like that in my Poetry Thursdays, people comment that's not poetry, like that type of poetry that I love. The only way I can describe it, because I'm currently reading it, is that tarology feels like, you know how there is absurdist fiction, this feels like absurdist non-fiction. And there's this quote where he says that tarology is to occult traditions what the subway vent was to Marilyn's dress. So it's very subversive and very rebellious. It's super funny. I'm really loving it. And again, it feels like absurdist non-fiction, like nothing makes sense. It's or in its nonsense it makes sense, if that makes sense. So that one is about tarot, and I think you can, I mean, it's pretty obvious how a book about tarot would be would be appropriate for the secret prompt, right? And then the other one is a book about the Enneagram. So the Enneagram is another okay, so the simple way to put it is like a personality framework system, but it's way deeper than that. Its basis is in your core fears and your core sense of lacking. So like very shadowy aspects of yourself, which I feel like shadowy aspect of yourself is a phrase that makes sense in TarotTube, and I don't know if it makes sense on BookTube, but it's from these aspects of yourself that are deeply hidden within you, that are come from maybe like childhood traumas that I think that you keep locked inside. And so the Enneagram kind of like unlocks those deep core fears and traumas within you, so you can see again how it would relate to the secret prompt. So yeah, so those are the books I'm planning to read in this first draft of a TBR. But of course there are tons of other books that I want to read, but I'm keeping it realistic at the moment, and I'm giving you one, except in those cases, 2 books per prompt. And then as the month goes along, if I feel like reading something else, I will pick up more books. My goal, my ideal is always thinking that I'm going to read a ton, I'm going to finish a ton of books, but realistically I usually either only finish the prompts or not even finish all of the prompts. So I wanted to keep this realistic, but definitely stay tuned, because I will be talking about what I am reading or what I read for Nonfiction November, and you will maybe see these books that I talked about today, or you will maybe see these books and others, or maybe just others because I deviated from my TBR. Who knows what happened, what will happen. But that will be it for the moment. I hope you will join Nonfiction November as well. I hope you are having a good weekend and that you have a good next week. And in the meantime, I wish you happy reading.